We're live, Jeff.
Great, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Albany County Legislature's Personnel Committee. I think we'll start the meeting by taking a roll call.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ethier? Mr. Kuhn?
Here.
Drake? Grimm?
Here.
Ray Joyce is excused this evening. Lakakis?
Here.
Reedy?
Here.
Simpson?
Here.
And Ward?
Here.
6 present, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you very much. I believe the first item on our agenda is approving the minutes from our last meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Great. All those in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I think we're going to take items 5 and 6 on our agenda out of order. So, Madam Counsel, would you please read those agenda items?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 is authorizing Shaker Place Rehabilitation and Nursing Center to consider out-of-county applicants for the positions of social worker and dietitian. Mr. Slack, is here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. We've placed this RLA in to request that we be permitted to hire out of county for social worker licensed New York State, which is a requirement under the CMS and New York State Department of Health regulatory requirements. We've been looking for many months now for a candidate and have been unable to find one in our county. And the same for dietitians, which is also a requirement under the CMS and New York State Department of Health regulatory regulations. We need to fill these positions, and we've been unable to do so in looking in our county only. So we're asking permission to move to open these positions up for people who may be interested who do not reside in Albany County.
Mr. Chair,
Are there any questions? All right, hearing none, can I have a motion for, I guess, Rebecca, do we want to have a motion first for item number 5, or can we take them combined?
Nope, Mr. Giordano's item will need to be considered separately.
Okay,
I'll make the
great.
motion.
So can I have a,
I'll
thank
second.
you, can I have a second?
Yes, please.
Fantastic. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, so the motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Have a nice evening.
Take care, Larry.
You too. So I
right.
believe the next item then we're going to consider is number 6.
Yes, item 6 is authorizing the Department of Mental Health to consider out-of-county applicants for all clinical positions, and Dr. Giordano is here.
Great.
Good
Dr.
evening.
Giordano?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you. We had come to this committee earlier in the year and asked for, made a similar request regarding our social workers. And I think we erred in not including all of our clinical positions in addition, because what we found subsequent to that is that we're having the same challenge with psychiatric nurse, with psychologist, with mental health assistant, with licensed mental health counselor. And what we're asking this evening is that we be permitted to entertain candidates from outside the county. And I will tell you that we've had a number of opportunities with out-of-county candidates. One of the challenges is that even with a 1 or 2 year waiver, people are often not interested, at least qualified candidates who are established, for example, living in another county by a few yards or feet. They're not about to pick up their home and family to move, but they would be certainly willing and able candidates. So we would ask the consideration for the waiver, and I would just slip in there the idea that putting any time limit on it, decreases our chances. So We asked for your,
Well,
right?
yeah, I think there was some discussion of this a little offline, but Dr. Giordano, we're considering a resolution for a 2-year suspension of the residency requirement, and anyone hired under the current language of the resolution, anyone hired during that suspension period will be permanently grandfathered in, at least with respect to their current position, so that if they're hired during that period of time, they would be under no, at least people hired in that period would be under no obligation while in that position to move to Albany County.
Mr. Chairman, that would help us immensely. Thank you for that clarification.
Oh, you're welcome. So I think we can grant you the waiver, and then once let's assume for the sake of discussion, this other resolution that we're going to take up in a few moments passes and then passes the entire legislature, then you would be at liberty to hire people at least for that 2-year period, and they could then, if they do live over the border or something like that, they would not need to move to Albany County. At least it would be permanent for them, and then we'll see what happens after 2 more years.
I understand. That would be. I'll keep my eyes and ears open to see how that goes. Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Giordano?
I have a comment, not for Dr. Giordano, but for the committee. I think that I haven't been involved with the deliberations on the extent or the waiver for residency, but I think that we shouldn't put a 2-year limitation, because it still would dissuade some candidates, because their promotion potentials that they might not want to be excluded from. And just based on the disparity between what the state pays and what we pay, I think it's still a artificial barrier to have a 2-year waiver and not have people who are looking, for long career tenure to be barred from promotion because they haven't relocated. So I just think we should consider that. We don't have to decide it tonight, but I think it's an important consideration.
I appreciate that. I think we'll have a discussion on that probably just in a few moments. But it's a good point, and let's pick that up in a few minutes when we get to that agenda item.
Very good.
But in the meantime, if there are no questions, can we have a motion with respect to
I'll make a
item
motion.
number 6?
Second.
Second? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Unanimous. Thank you, Dr. Giordano.
Thank you, sir. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night, Doctor.
Night, Doc.
So then I would believe, Rebecca, would that take us to agenda item number 2?
Yes, agenda items 2 and 3, the public hearing and the local law E for the salary disclosure law are tabled at the request of the sponsor this evening. So item 4 is providing a suspension of the residency requirement for employees of Albany County. And Mr. Ward is here this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to speak on this first, or?
Yes, I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution comes forward really. I was asked to testify before the Rules Reform Committee, and I want to thank Chair Lukakis and Mr. Kuhn, Mr. Grimm for allowing me to come in and speak on this issue, which really is of great importance to our county workforce right now. And I don't think it's any surprise to anybody. It's a world, or at least a national issue, is the fact that we're having a hard time finding employees. And Albany County is not immune to that. And they've had as you know, on this personnel committee, several department heads have come to us with requests for waivers, and that isn't going away anytime soon. So we all met, and my name seems to be on as the sponsor, but it's really Ms. Lukakis and Mr. Grimm and Mr. Kuhn and a few others that contributed this and staff. And we've come up with a resolution that I think would fit the needs of our workforce without giving, without making it a forever issue, but to give it a 2-year period to study the issue of residency versus non-residency. And hopefully bolster our workforce to get more applicants, more qualified individuals to apply for positions in our county at this time. If anybody has any questions, they can just ask.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the comment I made before. I think, again, if you put a 2-year, limitation on hiring people, you especially in this economic environment, you really are doing us a disservice by creating an artificial barrier. See, I mean, the ability to waive the residency requirement if needed doesn't take away our ability to prioritize, residents. But I
Correct.
think, there's a huge disparity in pay between the state, which has many more positions, and the county. So I think that the 2 years is still going to be a barrier that's going to bite us in the backside. That's, I think if you go to New York State and look at their salary grades and look at their first level of management, the grade 23 is the first supervisory level. That position pays close to $100,000 right now. Our equivalent is nowhere near that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, Mr. Simpson, but I think we want to look at this as sort of a pilot program and take a look at it for 2 years. Now, anybody that's hired during this 2 years will be exempt from residency requirements, so they never have to move in to the county. And I know that that's going to, some people will be upset with that, but I think this is a way to open the door a little bit and take a look at it for a couple of years and see the results. And if you look at the last resolve clause, well, it's not the last on the first page. Not the first page. The second from last resolve clause, the resolution, there is a reporting requirement from the agencies to let us know the effectiveness of this resolution, and it will give us an opportunity whether or not to actually evaluate whether or not we want to extend it or any other action that the legislature wishes to take.
Would the people who hired during the trial period be allowed to sit for promotion exams after the 2-year period?
Yep. Yes, they
Yeah,
will.
they would.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Okay.
And again, the agencies, or depending on if it's a department head, then we have confirmation, or most department heads, we have confirmation ability, and then the agencies have the ability to decide whether or not they prefer a resident or not for the position. And I would hope that they look for qualified residents first, but however, it gives them the option to open up the pool of candidates, and I think that is our objective right here.
Yeah.
Mr. Simpson, unfortunately, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think, I believe the language says that if you're hired during this 2-year period, you have a permanent exemption from any residency requirement as long as you do not enter into an exempt position. One of the sort of, I guess, a department head or something like that. But so even if you, after this 2-year period, if you go for a promotion within your department, that your exemption would still be in place. So hopefully that would alleviate your concern about someone coming on board and not feeling like they don't have the opportunity to, if they're going to advance later in their career, they're going to have to move. I believe we tried to address that.
Okay,
it's a third resolve clause.
Can I have a question, Jeff, when you guys are done?
Yeah, and I'll just say to Mr. Simpson, I'm probably I lean more towards your direction when it comes to the residency requirement, but this resolution was a product of a compromise. There was a lot of discussion about what the impact was of the residency requirement and how it affected hiring. And there were a lot of questions that we really didn't have necessarily good data on. So as Mr. Ward has indicated, we're going to do this for 2 years, and then we're asking the department heads to come back at the end of that 2-year period and report to the legislature about how this affected their ability to hire, how it affected retention, how all the various facets of personnel within Albany County. And then, the legislature will hopefully then be in a more informed position to decide what's going to happen on a long-term basis. But this is sort of a pilot program so that we can all become smarter on this and then, figure out what we're going to do on a permanent basis in 2 years' time.
That's fine.
May I? Jeff?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. McCaucus. Thank you.
I would just add that, that compromise also included, we did interview and had with us human resources and some executive level staff people. So we had the staff perspective and HR perspective, our perspective, and we all did disagree in a lot of ways, but we all came to this. And so I'm hoping that it will work. But I wanted to know, I thought of it this when you sent your last suggestions, Jeff. Do we want to have a reporting mechanism before the second year? Do you want to try one report at the end of each year just to see how it changes, or is there any?
I thought we talked about that in the rules reform discussion. We said we wouldn't have enough time to really evaluate it in the first year, but I have no objection to that. But
I just wanted to be sure because I couldn't remember before we approved the.
Now, the other person who was involved in those discussions was the Director of Civil Service too.
Yeah.
We don't want to leave his important input out.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one to Ms. Lecoq's point, I noticed that the reporting time was reduced from 90 days to 30 days. And the reason I had originally suggested 90 days was to give the legislature enough time to consider whatever input it received from the department heads long enough in advance of the end of the 2-year period so that whatever the legislature decides to do, it can potentially do at the end of the 2-year period. If the reports are only provided 30 days before the end of the 2-year period, just knowing that the pace at which things happen sometimes in the legislature, I don't know if that's necessarily enough time for.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we actually went from 30 to 90. We went the other way around.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, my mistake. Then I think that's a good change, and maybe that would even address Ms. Lekakis' point about it's almost like because it's further back in time. We'll get a sense of how things are working. Okay, 90 days is great.
All right, so I also have one more question. So it's not clear that this would be it'll immediately go into effect whenever we vote on it. So that'll be another month, right? And so then that will be August. Well, August is better than in the middle of the budget period. I was just afraid that, if it was due at a certain time of the year, that was difficult for staff to, or, department heads to pull the kind of data together if they didn't have it, but that's assuaged by the date. So if we stay on track, I'll be fine with that then.
Yeah, they would have to send us a report if it's adopted in August. Send us the report in May. It'll give us plenty of time to take it into account for budgeting purposes, and give us plenty of time to get it to decide whether or not we want to extend it or not.
Yeah, sounds good.
Chairman Kuhn?
Yes, Mr. Grimm.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I think, by the way, this is a great example of collaboration. You know, everybody involved here has really done a good job. There's two legitimate competing interests here. The Coon camp that says, let's get the best people we can find anywhere. And then the Ward camp, which says, hey, you know what? We have a legitimate interest in trying to get Albany County people jobs in Albany County.
Qualified Albany County people.
Qualified Albany County people. So I think this is a good compromise to say, let's, you know, the economy is such, because we've had all the department heads come in and say, come on, we need this help. But a couple of years later, let's take another look at it. I think it's a great idea you had, Sean. And I think that's what we really should do, is reevaluate this a couple of years from now and see where we stand. And I think that's a sensible bipartisan approach that we've taken here. One thing I also want to talk about, this idea that the state is taking money, taking employees from us. We can't compete with the state. They're $220 billion budget. We're less than $1 billion. And I don't think we should try to compete with them. But I'll say this, now that we've loosened the residency requirements, that's going to expand the pool of applicants for us in the county. So that's going to help us with this, you know, sort of competition that we have with the state. But we're never going to win that battle. And that's okay. The state's a much bigger government, but we will have an opportunity to bring in more applicants because of we're loosening this. And we've heard this from our commissioners and our directors. So kudos to everybody involved. And I think we got it exactly right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this? Okay, hearing none. Can I have a motion to move this item forward?
Love to give you a motion.
Can I second it as the chair? Or am I not supposed to do that?
Yeah. Okay.
Dustin also raised his hand.
Sorry, I was muted. You
Okay,
can, but
gotcha.
Dustin raised his hand also.
All right. Well, we'll
I
say
don't know if it was
seconded by Mr. Reedy. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. It's unanimous. Great job, everybody. Madam Counsel, any other items on the agenda?
There's no further business before this committee this evening.
Great.
Look at
Thank
that,
you,
we're gonna
everybody.
finish in a minute to spare to the next meeting.
Well, I run a tight ship.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Pat, this is Mert. Do I need to physically come in to have my Granicus updated? I'm still on November of 2011.
You probably should.
Yeah, you should.
So you can't do it. Can't be done remotely. Is that the idea?
There's a couple things that can't be done remotely, and I think if it's that old, something might be wrong with the pad. So you maybe
No,
bring the whole
I
pad
can
in.
Yeah, I can get everything else. But all right, I'll do this. I'll call Pat later. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion. Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.